Welcome to Unraveling Midlife. I'm your host, Sarah Spence. Thanks for joining me as I explore my own astrological midlife by speaking with all sorts of inspiring people about their life and work. Although common understanding of midlife is a bit older, astrological midlife relates to Western astrology transits that run from the mid-30s to the mid-40s for everyone. Each of the main midlife transits have an overall theme, though details vary by generation and by individual. It directly corresponds to the term midlife crisis, though I like to call this the midlife unraveling, and my therapist tells me to consider it as enlightenment. If you're new to the show, welcome. At the end of each episode, I share a track of my original music. Check out the show notes for links mentioned during this episode too. It's the new moon in Cancer for the release of this show, an upcoming lunar month to sink into themes of emotional environment and family connections. A quality of Cancer is also tenacity, the mama bear superpower, so be tenacious this month. My guest today is Kate Apanui. She's a life coach whose passion areas, not so mysteriously, line up with her midlife astrological transits. She works in the realm of crave, with programs on relationships with food. She also works with horses to assist in her coaching work. In this conversation, we find out more about her and the work she does, and then morph into learning more about the midlife astrology transits. Enjoy. Kate, welcome to Unraveling Midlife.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm really interested in the kind of work that you're doing, and so can you tell us a bit? Who are you? Who are you? Like, what kind of offerings do you have for the world?
I always find this like a really interesting question to answer because it's always changing. I feel like I can't just stick to my lane a little bit.
Feeling.
So what do I do? I'm a life coach. I professionally trained as a nurse and then kind of got out of that and wanted to kind of help people in a different way. And really, I do work with horses, and that's more to help the people than to help horsey people. So it's people sometimes people come who don't even like horses, or who are really scared of horses. Some people come and they just love horses and they're like, I don't know what you do, I just wanted to be around the horses. So I do work with horses, and I can get into that if you like a little bit. And then I do coaching offerings one-to-one, and I do some group coaching. And yeah, I think I really just like to help people be more themselves, is probably how I can best describe it, myself included.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And some of your group coaching specific into that relates to your podcast Crave as well, around food, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have done probably for about the past 3 years, I think, helping people. The way that I think about it is change the way they think, feel, and act around food. Because I think, particularly women, like we're just bombarded with so much information. And most women, if you said, what's a good way of eating for you? Most women kind of know, like, oh, if I eat this and if I don't eat that, I feel good or I feel bad. People know if intermittent fasting is for them or not. People know if juicing is for them or not. I don't think there's one right diet that is the right thing. But what I know people universally struggle with is doing what it is they most want to do. So having an idea about, yeah, I know it's really good for me to eat more vegetables, but actually doing that is quite difficult. So the Crave program that I run really helps people kind of understand, like, why is it that I'm struggling? It's not like, why is it that I can't follow through on the things that I most want to follow through on? And how can I actually start to do that? Because, yeah, it's really soul destroying to know I didn't want to overeat today, and here I go again. And that's just not a nice way for people to live. So I really like to help people move through that.
I'm picking that you start with food, but it probably kind of creeps out into like every area of life. Like, what are my blockers for everything? And it's just kind of coming up through food. Do you find that with a lot of people?
Yeah, so I call it like I call the program crave because like we're craving, something. People go, oh, I just crave chocolate or I just crave chips or whatever their thing is. And often, to be fair, like, alcohol comes up a lot in the program. People go, oh, I thought it was just food, but actually look at my wine situation. But I call it crave because I think we're craving more than just food. Food is like this sad substitute that we use for something much bigger that we're craving. But we can quickly and easily access food, and it sort of satisfies us a little bit in the moment, but doesn't necessarily really satisfy our cravings. So, I start with triggers and food and how your brain works and all of that. And then we kind of end the program with like, what's your vision for your life? Like, where are you not saying yes to something? And what is it that you would really like to be saying yes to? And that kind of thing.
Wow, that sounds inspiring, very inspiring.
Yeah, I really love it. I really love doing that.
And what was the inspiration for that, for creating Crave?
My own shitty problems. So, probably like, oh yeah. So, well, how Crave really came about was I had a group of girlfriends over one evening. And I don't even really know how, when you get talking about things, and they weren't particularly close girlfriends either. They were just a group of women that I knew and was friendly with. And we got chatting, and I started to divulge my eating habits, which was really kind of unlike me. I am quite an open person, but I hadn't really talked to anybody about this before. So I found it weird that I was talking to women that I didn't know particularly well. And I just realized, man, I'm not healthy here. Like not healthy in terms of, oh, I'm not eating enough vegetables, but like the way that I'm eating is really unbalanced. I'm eating way too much sometimes, and like, going to bed really uncomfortable and just like, physically uncomfortable. I have to lie on my stomach because I'm just so sore because I've eaten so much. And then like I'm intermittent fasting for the next 2 days, and I said that with like air quotations because it's not fasting when you're starving yourself because you've eaten too much, and it's sort of like a way to try and balance everything out. It wasn't a healthy mindset around food. I noticed I was obsessing around food. And yeah, I just thought, I just don't want to live like this anymore. So I randomly came across a book called Women, Food and God in the library. It was like, out on a shelf. Have
Oh,
you read Women, Food and God?
no, I have a couple of other food related books, but not that one.
Yeah, so it's by a woman called Janine Roth. And I mean, she's been around forever.
She's written a lot of books, right?
She's written a lot of books, yeah. And I think that may be her most, I could be wrong, but I think it might be her most recent. And it just really resonated with me. And so I sort of went on a big, like, I'm a life coach. How can I fix this for myself situation? And then I thought, man, there must be so many other people out there. Well, I know there are. I mean, this is probably a gross generalization, but many women that I talk to, they'll say, oh yeah, I want to lose 5 kilos. Like women have just got it on the brain.
I think we need to blame that on women's magazines and the media, like completely, especially, I don't know about you, like we similar in age, but like growing up as a teenager with Kate Moss, the waif look, not healthy.
Or, like I hadn't watched Friends in years, but I've got a teenage daughter and she's really into watching Friends. And, Monica and what's her name? Rachel, they're just so teeny tiny. And I grew up thinking that was like, a healthy, what I should be aiming for size. Yeah. So there's a lot there.
I think there's a few better models out there now. Like I was watching Amy Schumer, who's
Oh,
hilarious,
yes.
and she's
Yeah.
got a normal body.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot more in the media now. Like there's a lot of variation, whereas in the 90s, yeah, Kate Moss was the gold standard. Poor Kate Moss, she just takes such a hammering for that.
Oh yeah, actually got a feel for her. I mean, Elle Macpherson was kind of around, and I think it might have been a better one but still very, very slim.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we were, I don't know, it must be, I don't know what it's like to grow up as a teenager now, but I felt like I paid a lot of attention to supermodels as a teenager. I don't know why. Like,
Well, they were all through the especially the magazines, because that was the thing. Like the internet wasn't really a thing, and I mean it was there from the mid-90s, but it didn't have the power that it does now.
yeah, so I'm careful, like, I think women, when you're uncomfortable in your body because of a standard that's unnecessary. Like, trying to be as skinny as Kate Moss, for example, for me is completely unrealistic. It's not my body shape or size. But I also know when I'm indulging in habits or I'm just living in a body that's not comfortable for me.
Yeah.
Like it's just not a naturally good weight. And I think there's a difference between those things, like knowing like, oh yeah, it would feel better physically to be a different size would, yeah, I don't know.
A lot in my 20s. I was one of those classic people who go over to the UK, and the UK, living in the UK, for those of us that did the OEs, like I think pretty much most people came back carrying lots of extra weight, because we didn't meet for coffee, you went for a drink, and then they were like, oh, what was that drink,
Guinness?
no, something bites, snake
Snake
bites.
Yeah,
The cider beer and a shot of black currant. I mean, how many, like, oh yeah,
yeah,
great for me.
yeah. It's just a different cultural way of living.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So yeah. There's so many things around that to unravel, but yeah.
So I was looking, because Unraveling Midlife loosely based on astrology, and I noticed that you would
Yes.
have started working with crave, and that probably in your Pluto square, which is that first main astrological midlife transit that starts for our generation with Pluto, and goes through. Yours is actually your astrological midlife is even longer than mine, just because of
Oh
the play of the
gosh.
planets. So yeah, it's different generations have, like, because there's Pluto, there's Neptune, there's Uranus, there's Saturn, and Saturn's kind of a smaller one compared with the others, and that might have more of an impact for some people. And basically our parents' generation, they, like, two of them were like right over each other because the planets were right together when they were born, and ours are a little bit more staggered, and it depends how fast and slow the planets are playing and at the different times, especially with Uranus. So when you started the crave work, yeah, it was your Pluto square, when it's like revisiting things that you feel like you've got over. Oh yeah,
Mm.
I've landed that, I've learned it, I've moved on, and then suddenly, whoa, it's in your face again. You're like, I've got to sort it out, this shit, but it's right there again.
That's so funny that you say that, because I didn't have healthy eating habits as a teenager, and sort of probably lived about 10, 12 years of being a really healthy size and not even really thinking at all about food. Like I remember joking with other coaches, like I could never be a weight loss coach because I don't even, like, where would I even start? And then after I've got 3 children, and after the birth of my 3rd child, that's when it all went out the window. And that's when I was like, like literally what you said, I thought I was done thinking about food, worrying about food, like, having this as part of my life. So that's so interesting, isn't it?
It really is. I know it was a real shock to me, and I only found out about this Pluto square while I was in it, and I couldn't really see it. I knew it was a thing, but it's taken me quite some years to kind of go, oh, and that's what happened. Oh, and it's
Mm.
just these big transits aren't always comfortable, but we like life's going to deal them to us, so we just kind of get on with it, and it's good to kind of have some preparation as to how to move
Yeah.
forward. Like, you're in your Neptune square at the moment, and I wonder, with Neptune being a planet, like Pluto's a planet of big transformation, like you're going to transform. You don't have a choice. um
Right.
and then Neptune is this planet more about spirituality and connection and dreamy and nature. And I'm wondering if that relates to you getting interested in starting work with horses.
Oh my God. Oh, that is like so speaking my language. Because what did you say? Like spirituality and nature and like
Connectedness and
absolutely.
feeling one with the universe. Yeah.
That is 100% where I feel like my focus is at the moment. So yeah, I just find this fascinating. Like I've always had an interest in astrology, um, but it's so weird when somebody can tell you about yourself and you go, yes, that's it. That's the exact experience of it. It's so interesting. So Neptune, spirituality, what was the question?
Oh, I was did it is that time period, because it was pretty much like last year. Is that when you started to get interested in horses and working with horses? Because
Yeah.
yeah.
So I've done a I've been working with horses for quite a long time. Probably I want to say since 20 let me just think, 2011 was probably when I began like my horsework stuff.
Oh, that was your Saturn return. That's also another kind of significant life transit that everyone goes through, and it's around the age of 29 where things become there's often a shift. Like people might get married or have children or get divorced or grow up in some way, become more adult. Doesn't I can't really relate it back to the horses, but maybe it makes sense for you.
Oh yeah, that makes total sense for me. It definitely was when I did grow up, become more adult, start sort of making my own way in the world a little bit. And yeah, that's when I began my horsework. And even just the like I yeah, that's when I did all my like my solo travel and stuff like that, because I got married quite young when I was 22. So a lot of my life had been and still is with the same guy. But like when you like if you think about 22, that's so flippin' young, isn't it? Like, and if there's any 22-year-olds listening, they're like, no, I'm so adult. And you are. I mean, I was obviously making adult decisions, but
There's more to
yeah,
come.
there's way more to come. And probably, somebody who's 60 or 70 or 80 listening to this is like, oh, baby, you've got a long way to go.
I found that quite often when I talk to that age group, they have trouble remembering back to their like early 40s.
Yeah, interesting, eh? Because everything's so important while you're going through it. But yeah, no, definitely 2011 was quite a growing up year for sure. And so Neptune last year is absolutely when I started. So to kind of started working with horses, did a lot of work with horses, moved from France back to New Zealand, and then I was riding horses, which was just totally for pleasure, nothing to do with my work. And I fell off my horse and broke my back.
Eek.
And so then I stopped working with horses for, I think, about 3 years. Yeah. So was that in the stars?
I have to take a little bit of a closer look.
But yeah, so it was last year. Somebody was really kind of pushing me, like, you've got to go back to horses. And so yeah, I really sort of started that return to horses, and more, yeah, they are quite spiritual creatures. Yeah, as we all are.
And how did you just kind of got the prod? Oh, you need to work with horses with people as well as going back to horses, or was that separate kind of steps?
Um, I had a coach who, I said, oh, this is how I used to work with people. I'm not really interested in doing it anymore. And they were like, are you serious? Are you sure? And I said, yeah, no, that dream's kind of over. Like after I fell off my horse, I just really didn't want anything more to do with horses. I was really, I can see your face like,
Well, I'm
what?
just trying to get clarity, like the work you were doing before you fell off your horse. You were working with other people as well. Like, was that in a
Yeah.
coaching way?
Yeah. So I was working with horses, coaching people with horses. But yeah, when I fell off, I was just riding out on a farm. But I've kind of lost my train of thought. Yeah, so I had a coach who said, I think you should go back to the work that you were doing before you fell. And so I I really sort of trusted them, and thought, okay, it's worth a look, like just have a look down that road and see if there's anything there, because it would be a shame to let it go. It was such a big part of my life. And yeah, the more I started to look down that road and travel that path, I was like, oh no, actually, I'm not angry anymore. I don't hate them the way that I did, which sounds awful, but yeah.
So what was that first time going back to be with a horse like? Did you just stay next to the horse? You didn't get on the horse? Like,
Yep. So it was quite scary. Like I had a lot of anxiety around it. Um, but equally, like I can still feel it. It felt really emotional. It felt like a coming home. I just went and stood in a paddock with a horse, and it was my friend's horse. He's a beautiful, lovely horse that I'd known before. And yeah, it was like a really nice feeling. I was like, oh, a softening, I guess. Yeah. So I thought, oh, I should do that again. And so I just kept going back and yeah, slowly worked through, a few of my blocks and things that were kind of stopping me wanting to do that.
and so when you work with people with the horses, what does that involve? Like going into a paddock and standing next to a horse?
It could do. I think my idea of how I work with people and horses is another thing that's growing and evolving. But typically, the way that I think about it is that, um, so to give you kind of a picture of what it might look like, if you were to come and say, Kate, I want to work with horses, I might say, great, we'll put you into a round pen. And I might ask you to do an exercise with a horse. I might say, okay, see if you can get the horse to walk around the round pen. Does that make sense? Okay, so the horse is completely naked. They haven't got ropes or halters or anything. They're just like at liberty.
It's just the
And
horse that's naked, clearly.
just the horse that's naked. It's not a nightmare. And so then I watch how people approach that, like, how they try and make something happen. And some people just stand there and go, I don't know what to do. And other people might try and cuddle, like walk up to the horse and give it a cuddle and try and coax it along. And other people, I do a demo and safety and all of that first. So some people might try and exactly emulate what it is that I've done. Or they might start doing something and then second guess themselves and think, oh, is that right? And so after, like, I let it go for a little while, I watch them, and then I sort of say, like, okay, what are you bumping up against here? Like, if it's going perfectly, great. Like, what's the feedback that you're getting? If you're saying, oh, I don't know what to do, where else in your life do you feel like you don't know what to do? Like you're just standing stuck with a problem that you just really have no idea how to solve? Or where else does it feel like you're trying to cajole something along and it's just not connecting with you? Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm visioning, what would I do?
Yeah. And then
Stick my hand out and let it sniff my hand and maybe give it a stroke. And I don't know how to get a horse to walk. I don't have a lot of experience myself.
yeah. And so then like somebody might say, well, oh, my boss, I'm always coming up with good ideas and trying to lead them and show them how good it would be, but they just never listen to me. Or they might say, oh, with my teenager, I just feel really stuck. I just don't know what to do. So I'm just doing nothing. Or whatever it is. And then we sort of can coach a little bit around that. And so the way that the horse works is that horses are really, I mean, there's lots of layers of this, but horses are really quite great at showing us, like mirroring to us, acting like the people and the situations in our lives that are maybe a little bit challenging or difficult. And the reason that things, I don't want to oversimplify this for lots of reasons, but oftentimes the reason that people respond to us in a certain way is because of the energy that we carry, the thoughts that we think about something, the way that we feel about something. And so the horse kind of acts like the energy of your boss, your child, your partner, whatever. And you get to play with that in a different way. So when you shift your internal story through the coaching, or you shift that internal energy that you've got, then the horse goes, oh, okay, well, now I'm going to respond totally differently. And then people can start to realize, oh, if I can change something with a horse just by, changing my internal landscape, then I get to play with that with my kid or my boss or my partner. And you realize it's much less about, with a horse, they don't speak English. You can't say, well, if you do that and I do this, we'll meet in the middle and we'll come to some agreement. And, oftentimes we try and do that with the people in our lives, like you do that and I'll do this and then we'll be okay. We kind of hand our husbands, like, if you just emptied the dishwasher and vacuumed on Saturday, then I'd be much happier. But it's much more than that. It's a much bigger dance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Life is such a dance. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated. Like you got the Pluto spurred the group coaching with that on the food, and the Neptune spurred the horses. And I have to admit that I am curious what will happen with your Uranus transit, but it's another few years away.
When does that start?
Oh, it's in 2026.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah,
I say that like I know what I'm talking about, but it's because you sent me the little chart that showed me.
Yeah, so it's a little way away.
What does it typically look like? What's the kind of signs and symptoms?
It's like the big shake up. If you haven't got your life on track, Uranus will shake it up so that you do get your life on track, and you can either kind of flow with it, with those kind of change, lightning bolt kind of flashes of inspiration type energies, or it might be erratic and chaotic. Like I did have an episode with talked to a few astrologers on my podcast, but there was one in the summer, Levi Banner, and he said to me, well, I tend to find that people who have who've had a lot of Uranian, because Uranian influence in their chart, they're kind of familiar with that energy, so they find it a little bit easier. So I was like, oh, please, I do. So let that be me. And but I mean, I'm only just kind of probably in the first third. I did my last podcast episode was on my experience of it. And one thing I found really hilarious when I was thinking about what to say on the podcast was that, this is the classic midlife crisis. So my therapist said to me, well, no, if you're in the spiritual realm, your midlife crisis is kind of it's a kind of a very normal thing, but if you're living in a spiritual kind of way, it's your opportunity for enlightenment, right?
Yeah.
My astrology teacher would call it the midlife crisis, and then I started calling it the midlife unraveling, from Brené Brown's essay, The Midlife Unraveling, which was excellent, and how I named the podcast. And so the Uranian influence, my astrology teacher Harsha has started calling the midlife unraveling, just because I kept correcting her for about a few years.
Yeah, I love
unraveling. It's an unraveling. She got sick of it, so I don't know. Or maybe she liked it too. So there's this crisis, but like, and the first thing I ever heard, like, oh, that middle-aged thing. I mean, not that we
Mm.
now in our early 40s, like, say that middle age, that's your 50s, not your 40s,
Yeah, we
but
keep pushing middle age off a
pushing
bit
it.
further.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we have that midlife, quintessential midlife crisis when, maybe someone gets divorced. A lot of marriages, from people I've talked to on the podcast, a lot of marriages seem to split up around that time.
Mm.
And then someone might buy a sports car or a motorcycle, or a lot of men, that kind of
That's your
essential thing. And
quintessential. Yeah.
I was thinking about that, and I was like, oh, hang on, I got a new car last year, and well, it was secondhand, but it was new for me. And I thought, hang on, I got one that was a bit more expensive than I was planning, and it's kind of sporty looking, but it's very practical because I like practical, and it's pretty much the same as my Corolla, but it's like, it's a different type, and it looks quite sporty. It's like got rocket ship back seat, opening handles at the top and stuff. And I looked in the ephemeris with all the dates of the planets, and I was like, oh, it was my midlife crisis purchase.
Right on track.
Right on track. I was like, I can't believe I even did that and didn't realize for another 9 months, right?
So interesting. So then what is, not to hijack your podcast, but I'm interested,
Yeah.
what, like, we can say, oh, typically men sort of buy sports cars or motorbikes or whatever.
Well, so
Um, yeah, well, what's the quintessential midlife um thing that a woman does?
that's a really good question. Um, I
Like, is it divorce?
I don't think so. I don't think so, not necessarily.
No, yeah, like, or is it, I don't know, the thing that popped into my head, is it um is it a boob job or a nose job or a facelift or something like that?
I can't think of
If we
anyone of that age that, I don't know very many people have had any of those, but none of them were in that astrological midlife age. Yeah.
don't
No,
know,
that's a very
I'm
good
just thinking,
question.
like, yeah,
Maybe we
because we
should get
could
a
say,
panel
oh, that's
together
when the
and do a
men buy the
podcast
sports
on that
car.
question.
Yeah, because we know, oh, that's when men buy sports cars or have affairs, with much younger women. They're sort of, I don't know, that's kind of what pops into my head is of men having midlife crises. And that's probably very judgmental, but it's just the picture I get. But I don't
Yeah.
have a picture of what women do.
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't contemplated it. Oh well, to be continued, dot dot
To be
dot.
continued. Yeah. Because I think there's also, there's a lot going on for us. Like there's the midlife stuff, but then there's also like menopause and perimenopause. Like there's the real physical changes that we're going through as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's massive.
It's for a lot of people, a lot of people who are born female. That's
Mm,
around the time that a lot of people do start perimenopause, but not everyone.
yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Definitely questions.
Yeah, I'm definitely talking in generalities. Not all men go and buy sports cars and have affairs.
No, no, not at
And
all.
I talked to my husband last night about it. I said, oh, I'm doing this podcast tomorrow in midlife. And he's like, yeah, I guess there are quite a few people getting divorced. Like he could think of people.
And I don't know if it's what society's just doing at the moment, but there's a lot more openness about polyamory. And so I'm having a few friends that like, oh, I'm not interested in a monogamous relationship. I want to be polyamorous, and a lot more, probably a lot of men really. And it's becoming
Mm.
like my friends, single friends, telling me that they're on whatever dating app, and they're like, oh yeah, and these ones say that they're polyamorous, and that's not me, so moving on. And then other people that are like, oh yeah, I want to try polyamory, I've never done it, so let's see how it goes. So there's another whole kind of,
That's a whole other podcast.
yeah. Oh my gosh, taking notes again, right? Polyamory. Yeah, you're right. I probably, yeah, that'd be a good one. I guess the thing is, a lot of the people I know that are polyamorous aren't they're probably more towards the beginning of their astrological midlife. Like most of the people I've come across polyamorous are a bit younger, like probably in their mid-30s.
Mm.
So yeah, who knows? Oh, there's so many different people, and I'm sure listeners will know that they'll be like, but I know someone.
Oh yeah, totally. That's always the case.
Oh, and on that note, Kate, how do people find you? Not for polyamory, I assume.
It's not on Tinder. Right. So, oh, hang on. Before we go, tell me about Saturn.
Oh,
What does
Saturn.
Saturn do? So, like Uranus is the big shakeup. Then what happens in Saturn?
Yeah, right. So we talked a bit about Saturn return, which is when Saturn comes back at 29, when it comes back to where it was when you were born, with the kind of movement into being an adult. And
Right.
so when you're, I think you'll be like 45, 44. I'll be 45 when mine happens. Saturn comes to 180 degrees, so it's opposite. And so
Yeah.
it's about structuring life. And so
Okay.
there might be a bit of a shake-up. I just discovered when I looked forward in the book, I was like, oh yeah, mine's just, it's a kind of a quick once over. But planets from our vantage point, they appear to go backwards and then forwards again,
Mm.
right? So it's we all kind of, a lot of us have heard about Mercury retrograde because it happens three
Yeah.
times a year. We've got a Venus retrograde happening at the end of July. So there's 40 days where Venus goes backwards and switches from the morning star to the evening star, or is it the other way? I should know this. But it becomes invisible for a time because it's in line with the sun.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so every planet except the sun and the moon, who that technically aren't planets, do have a retrograde period. And that's why like a Pluto or a Neptune, they last so long because they're quite a way out, and then they go forwards, then they go backwards over that point that relates to where a planet was in your birth chart. So
Ah,
Saturn, for me, it's going over, and I'm like, oh yeah, that happened with my Saturn return. It just went straight over. But then Saturn is going, quote unquote, backwards.
yeah.
It's going to hit me again. So I'm going to have like this long Saturn opposition. So I'm like, okay, I'm really going to get organized, Saturn keywords, organized, structure, um, time management, that kind of thing.
Okay, interesting. I
And
could
keep
do
in
with a bit of
mind,
Saturn in my life.
yeah, Saturn can be good like that. And I guess the thing to remember with astrology is we've been talking about the transits that hit everyone, like as kind of like
Mm.
a rite of passage in life. But we all
Mm.
have our own birth charts, and Pluto will interact with one of your other planets that at other points in your life.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just used to be like, oh, well, the Saturn and the Pluto there, they can be quite difficult transits, which is the interaction of and the angle, making a specific angle. But there's always, some people have charts where things are kind of spread out. Always going to have a Pluto transit. I'm always transforming. That's just how life is.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's so fascinating.
yeah. There's
Ah,
lots to delve into, and there's lots available online. Gosh, my Instagram feed is basically all astrology and human design. Human
yeah.
design is another topic. I'll refer you back to episode 7.
Yeah, no, but it is quite interesting because, I don't know anything about astrology, but I do like to follow it, like I read
Mhm.
everything every day and what have you. Um, and it is quite interesting to consider it in the context of something like midlife.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a really different way to consider it. I really like that.
So yeah, you've got Saturn, and then there's a little bit of a break, and then Chiron comes back to where it was when you were born, and that's a real health check. So we were actually discussing it in my astrology class last week or the week before about getting things aligned, and
Yes.
becoming more healthy in that period of midlife and in your 40s, leading up to that when Chiron comes back to where it was when you were born. The more preparation you can do for being in a healthy space for that, the better for your health.
Oh, that is so interesting because I think like we feel the nudge at
Mm.
this time, or I feel the nudge at least, like, okay, you're not here forever and you want to enjoy the next period of your life
Mm.
and make sure that it's healthy and, I'm not just like on a downward spiral. So it's interesting that there's actually a planet that comes in and goes, hey, how's it going? Like
Yeah.
physically, health speaking. That's so interesting. So that's Chiron.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I'm in the wrong
Chiron's
position.
Chiron's an interesting one. Yeah, it's doing lots of aspecting in my chart at the moment. So I know that I'm been on a health kick for the longest I've ever been on. Like, okay, well, this is a way of life now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Oh, very cool. All right. So I'll shut up now.
Yeah, there's more. Saturn comes around again at 58 and another level of responsibility. Yeah. And
Mm.
then there's more. In fact, I think some of my earlier episodes, and I could actually put in a link for a few YouTube clips from an astrologer I like who actually goes through the transits for each decade. So if you want to find out what your teenager's going through,
Oh, that's such a good idea.
Saturn is opposite again, like the ones we were just talking about that's coming up in a couple of years for you. Next year for me, it's Saturn comes around directly opposite where it was when you were born. I've got a friend who's she's having her Saturn opposition at the same time as her daughter's having her Saturn opposition at 15
Mm.
because she gave birth around the time of her Saturn return. Yeah.
And so when you know this kind of information, like, okay, say I'm squaring Pluto at the moment. Is that right? I'm going through this.
Pluto square Pluto.
Okay. And then how do you kind of, as a midlifer, use that information to your advantage?
I think that's a whole nother podcast. I'll refer you to episode 8.
Episode 8. Okay. Awesome.
Or is it 9? I will put it in the show notes just for
Listen to them both.
clarity with a link.
Okay. Perfect.
Great.
Love it. Yeah, so how do people find me? I'm on Instagram, just as Kate Apanui, I think. And you can find my website, kateapanui.com. And I'm on Facebook too.
Do you do
And
some remote work as well as in person?
yeah, so I do a lot of my work is via Zoom.
Right.
Yeah, so, COVID was kind of helpful to me in that way where people became really comfortable talking over Zoom and realized how easy that actually is. So yeah, that's most of my work is on Zoom.
Except the horses.
Except for the horses. Yeah.
So if anyone's in the Bay of Plenty and wants to do some horse work.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sort of looking at expanding a wee bit into some other areas so that more people can reach horses. But yeah, I work out of Cambridge and Katikati with horses. So yeah, both of those facilities are available. And yeah, I do groups, I do teams. So some like business groups come through. Yeah, corporate stuff. Yeah.
Nice.
Really good.
Awesome. Oh, thanks so much, Kate. It's been great chatting with you, even if we did end up interviewing each other. That was great. I'm okay.
I just find the interviews that I listen to that are conversational are
They're so
so
much more
rich.
interesting.
I know, because then you really start to actually unravel a topic a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure that, the questions I have are similar to other people. I don't know.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. There were some brilliant questions. I've been making notes.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Welcome to the music section of the show. This song was recorded live at New Zealand Spirit South Island in January 2023. It reminds me of the spiral we spoke about with the Pluto Square midlife transit, where issues we thought were done and dusted rear up again. It's like a spiral. We think we've mastered something and it comes back round and we have learnt a bit, but it comes back to the same point. It rears up again, and then there's more mastery. And how after mastering at each time coming round again to that same issue, another level up, I feel my power with that latest life lesson learned. Of course, that's until the next one. But enjoy. This is called Power.
Power, I denied it for so long. Told myself that I was wrong. Power, it's inside us all, and there's no use keeping ourselves small. I had an issue being seen, hid myself, I was not keen to show the world my true glory. And I pretended where I could, but still I lived by lots of shoulds. It became time to break that old story. Oh, power, I denied it for so long. Told myself that I was wrong. Power, it's inside us all, and there's no use keeping ourselves small. I'm not sure just where it started, but now I can't discard it. I don't need it anymore. There were so many layers there, and much too much I cared about what others thought of me more. Oh, power, I denied it for so long. Told myself that I was wrong. Power, it's inside us all, and there's no use keeping ourselves small. Lying low is old news now, 'cause I've discovered how I can live my flaming fullness. I feel blessed to have found an effective way to ground and easily find my stillness. Oh, power, I denied it for so long. Told myself that I was wrong. Power, it's inside us all, and there's no use keeping ourselves small. Now I practice where I can be the strength that I have, 'cause now is always the hour. It's time to show and shine the inner joy that's mine and step into my full power. Oh, power, I denied it for so long. Told myself that I was wrong. Power, it's inside us all, and there's no use making ourselves small. There's no use making ourselves small. Power, I denied it for so long. Told myself that I was wrong. Power, it's inside us all, and there's no use making ourselves small. There's no use making ourselves small.
Unraveling Midlife is brought to you from Aotearoa, New Zealand by www.sarahmarlowspence.com. Theme music is by Sarah Marlow Spence and Sarasvati Marie Willis, and art by Samantha Hepburn.